So I have been working with the Waldorf curriculum and the qualifications in Flanders and also outside of Flanders for 25 years by now. It all started in Flanders, in Belgium, when the government demanded that the Steiner schools would work with the same very detailed learning outcomes or attainment targets as all other schools in our country or in the Flemish, Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. Now, this meant that we got the impression we can't do Waldorf anymore. And we went to the Constitutional Court to defend our right of freedom of education that is in our Constitution, and we won. And we were allowed to write our own attainment targets, but there was a condition, and the condition was it needed to be of equal worth as the official state attainment targets. Now, this involves a lot of work. And as a teacher already, I was involved in the working groups. And then later in 2004, I started working for the Federation of the Steiner Schools in Flanders. And up to 2019, so for 15 years, it was my responsibility to lead this process of subsequent changes in the attainment targets of the state. And every time they changed, we had to change, or at least adapt. And then you had to translate that into curriculum plans and how to deliver it all in the secondary Waldorf schools. Because I was working on the level of the secondary Waldorf schools, which is in Belgium from class 7 onwards until class 12. And that is, of course, connected to the upper school qualification. Now, the Waldorf curriculum wants to offer a comprehensive schooling for all, we say. And up to class 8 or 9, that has been really successful, not only in our country, in many countries. But what about the upper school? It differs around the world. I took a look at the world list and I noticed some things. For instance, in America and Brazil, not many schools offer an upper school to class 12. But in Argentina, they almost all do. Or in some countries, many stop after class 10 or 11, such as Colombia and India and Russia and Ukraine. And in Belgium and the Netherlands, the schools offer a primary school setting with kindergarten and up till class 6 in one system, and then it changes to a secondary system, and the schools are officially separated. And so the schools from 7 to 12 are called secondary education, but they are often in the same campus. So as far as I can see, then the curriculum just goes on. After class 6, it goes on in class 7, and it is still a whole as a curriculum, as a Waldorf curriculum. But the official system is different. In Scandinavia, the elementary school stops after class 9, or in Norway after class 10. And there are far less gymnasia or upper schools, so that go on from class 10 or 11 onwards, than schools going up to class 8 or 9. In Germany, these schools often go up to class 13 and take the 13th year as the year where they prepare for the Abitur, so for the university entrance if they want to. But I heard that many pupils also leave after class 10, after they had their so-called mittlere Reife, and then they go to other institutions or to education within a company. And some countries don't even have upper schools, like Ireland, or hardly any, such as Italy and Poland. And so what I see all around in the world is that for the upper schools or the high schools or however you want to call it, or the gymnasium, it is much more difficult for Waldorf schools to go on in the way that it was built from the beginning. The mainstream educational system and the mainstream educational traditions influence what is possible. Now, can you change to next slide, please? Yes. So there are possibilities to do something with it. And the first possibility is to really follow the state criteria, which means often state exams, like the baccalaureate, the matura, the abitur, the Dutch national exams. It has some influence on or the A levels in Britain. It has some influence on the last year or years in the upper school, but still there is a lot of freedom before that. And then they take the external exam, the pupils take the external exam to enter university, for instance. But there are other systems. You can also make it compatible with the state expectations. Then you have acknowledged educational qualifications. Now, we don't have them in many countries, but we do have them in Flanders, in Belgium, in Norway, and in New Zealand. And then the assessment of the teacher is still valued. So it's the teacher who actually is responsible, or the group of teachers, the college of teachers is responsible for offering the qualification on the basis of certain standards. And then they can go on to university. Can you take the next slide, maybe? Yes. I want to take the definition of a qualification first. What is a qualification? A qualification is an official record or an official document, such as a degree, a certificate, or a diploma, which shows that you have completed a course of study or training and are qualified to do something. Now, there are two ways of looking at it. One is you have completed a course of study that goes towards higher education, or you can also have a qualification that goes towards the work life. Already in the very first beginning, the very first 12th class, this was an issue. And the first 12th class pupils went to Rudolf Steiner and asked him, we want to study at Waldorf University, because they were aware that if they took the national exam, that it would be different than what they had been taught. And they were also aware that the universities would not teach the way they were taught in Waldorf school. But it never happened. Steiner could not do that. And even by now, in the 21st century, we only have a couple of institutions and for a couple of subjects that have university, that are on the level of the regular university qualifications, as Alanus Hochschule or the Oslo University, or the university in Leiden in Holland. So we still need to adapt to the societies, to the standards and the demands of the societies we have our Waldorf schools in, and we have to adapt the learning outcomes of the schooling of our youngsters to these situations. So both the central exams and the extra years, within extra years, or some totally different qualifications, they all have pros and cons. With central exams, you often need this extra year, or you adapt already earlier. And the systems of private schools or semi-private schools or state funding also influence the whole thing with qualifications. Often in countries where there is state funding for Waldorf schools, such as in the Netherlands and in Flanders and in the Scandinavian countries, it comes with state interference, bigger or smaller, it depends, but it plays a role for qualifications. Um, Slide 3, maybe. You see here, oh, slide 4, sorry, slide 4. Can you go to slide 4, please? Yes. This is the European qualification framework. And I'm not sure that you are aware of this, but this is something we have been working with Waldorf people quite a lot, because we were looking for a way to get to an international Waldorf upper school qualification. And then you have to take into account this qualification framework. It has not only an influence in Europe, it also has an influence outside of Europe. It was designed to have an instrument of comparison between countries and of being able to travel from one country to another with a certain qualification. Now, as you can see, you have level 1, that's only basic knowledge and simple tasks. Usually it's after primary school somewhere. And then you have a second level of real factual knowledge. And then comes the importance for qualifications for our youngsters. Level 3. In Britain, it's called level 2, and the rest of us say level 3. It's when you have knowledge in a certain field. There is a much more broad description if you look at the material of the European Union, but it actually means that you are already kind of on your way to a vocation, to a profession. In Flanders, it's called beroepssecundair onderwijs, which means vocational education. In Britain, you have like the level almost of the GCSE, as they call it. And so it's a sort of it's a qualification or an exam, because it can also be, in our country, it's a qualification that is assessed by the teachers. In other countries, it can be a central exam, or it can be different. But you can't enter a university with it. Then you have level 4. Level 4 is more broad theoretical knowledge. It's actually the university entrance qualification. And I see that I mixed up all of my letters in the slide. Sorry, I was typing too fast. But it's the university entrance qualifications level. You have Abitur, Baccalaureate, Matura, A-levels, VWO, that's in Holland. You have the Rudolf Steiner ASO in Flanders, so it's called Rudolf Steiner, the qualification. And you have the Norwegian studiekompetanse, which is put on the Waldorf curriculum. So also the Norwegians have it. And then you have the New Zealand certificate of Steiner education. These are all level 4s. Then you have level 5, and level 5 is actually a tertiary vocational qualification. So people with a level 3 can sometimes go on to a level 5 and then end up with a tertiary qualification. Level 6 is advanced knowledge, that's the bachelor or the Fachhochschule in Deutschland. And then you have level 7, highly specialized academic knowledge, which is the level of the master's degrees. And then you have level 8, the most advanced knowledge of the PhD and the doctorate. Now, this whole framework has an influence across the globe, actually. I've seen that in other places too. And it is of interest if we would look at the whole thing from an international point of view. But curriculum is more than a qualification. So can you go to slide 5? A curriculum, as we look at it, wants to trigger development. Development by doing certain things in certain ways at a certain age. Now, we have a very nice way of thinking that is, I think, invented by Kat Bransby and Martin Rawson, but Martin has to say whether it's true what I say. But it is very simple. You have a macro curriculum, and that is the general curriculum or the basics that we have behind all of our curricula in the whole of our Waldorf movement. But then there is a meso level, and there you adapt to national and regional culture and systems. And there is also an art of teaching in the classroom, and that's the micro level, what we all do in class. So when I think of curriculum, I like the way Boudalin uses the word in a very wide sense, which means including everything, the pupil's experience in school, not only the contents of teaching and learning, but also the way teachers teach and even the aesthetics of the internal and external environment of the schools, which all have an influence. And I think also Kath and Martin think in the same way, or I'm sure they are. And although I didn't know this distinction when I worked for the Federation and tried to defend the Waldorf curriculum in our country, this was exactly what I had to deal with. I had to try to preserve the macro level, that they would not hurt that. That was the main objective. And then I had to, or not me alone, we as a team had to defend it within this meso level of the Flemish situation, which is actually rather contrary to the ideas of Waldorf when it comes to what you want pupils to learn from class 7 onwards. Could we come to a macro curriculum for the upper school? I think so, and I hope so. I was also involved in the European Portfolio Certificate Project, in the European Waldorf Diploma Project, in the introduction of the New Zealand Certificate of Steiner Waldorf Education in Europe. All of these were attempts to make something that could help us all in the whole world. Very idealistic, but still a nice idea. I also followed the process of a British project called Acknowledging Creative Thinking Skills project, and it led to a qualification in the British framework on our level 3, their level 2. And so I really hoped we could get to this international qualification with accompanied by university entrance rights. But it is a tough fight, and the national situations or the national context always makes it difficult. Can you take the next slide? So, but what is then what can we then find as macro curriculum for an upper school? One thing stands above all. That's the threefold method of perceptual observation or conclusion, judgment, and concept that we all try to use in upper school as much as possible. And we use the nights to come to the concepts in the end. And we also want to get the pupils to have an understanding of the whole world, of many things in the world, that they don't feel strange going out into that world. But how do you do that? The world is so big, there is so much to do. It's a nice ideal, but how to do it? Can you go to the next slide? Other ideas also play a huge role. Idealism, a sense of purpose in life, the choice of a hero, which of all of my teachers is my hero, and often that is connected to the love for the tasks that hero brings, or to say it differently, if the mathematics teacher is your hero and you are really thriving on mathematics and you love that task, it is all connected to each other. And I think it's also connected to what we as persons or as personalities bring out of the pre-birth life. I know for myself, I was connected to languages, and it has played a role the whole of my life. And it was connected to my future life path, because my connection to languages brought about a lot of other things that have happened in my working life and in what I've done. So this feeling that you get when you are young, and the connection of your the interest you get in certain subjects and the feeling you get for certain contents and so on, are connected to both pre-birth and future life path, in my opinion. The next slide, the number 8 one, this one. And I'm sorry, here I have my mother tongue. I could not, yeah, I am not good at making these nice graphs, and the one who made it had no time to put it into English. I asked her, but she had no time. But let me show it or talk you through it. I think you can understand it. Now, this is a lemniscate. And in the middle of the lemniscate, there is a circle. And this circle is green with a reason, because it is connected to the heart. And the heart is connected to the words that you can see below in green. It is art practice, it's empathy, it's connections, it's emotion, it's observation. So this is the now, the here and now. This is the heart realm. And the blue part is hoofd, which is in English head. And this is the insight, the knowledge, the logic, the analysis, the strategy, and so on, all what we have in our heads, and what we also want to offer to our pupils, or have not offer, what we want to develop or help develop. And then you have on the other side the red part of the lemniscate. These are the hands. And the hands, they represent then the crafts, the technical competences, the executions, acting, tactics, and so on. Now, why do I use the image of a lemniscate here? And now I feel a bit frustrated because of the zoom, of course. You can maybe imagine I now go to the red side, and then I go to the blue side, and to the red side, and to the blue side. And all of these subjects that are connected to these realms of, or these words, that's the easiest to say, they interact. And above it all is something we often forget. I think we often say that it's head, heart, and hands when we talk about our curriculum. But we should also add spirit. And here the word spirit is still in English from the original that I had shown my colleague. But so it's good, it's still in English. And then you can also talk about purpose or values or sense or higher calling. Roeping is the word for higher calling. And I often have used this to explain in our country what we want to do. And I have noticed that if instead of going deep into spirituality, it is already very important to talk about concepts like a purpose in life, higher values, giving sense to life, higher calling, and so on. And that was a good addition. So I've used this image to explain in our country that all pupils need a balance in all of this until they come of age. But many educational systems go against this idea and start a sort of a segregation based on cognitive capacities of the pupils. That is done with the best intentions. But what is the result of blocking those who cannot reach certain cognitive standards? I wonder. And I was not the only wondering. In slide 9, I will show you something. Slide 9. There in the official systems, there is educational tracking, as it is called. Educational tracking means that you start to segregate pupils on the basis of their talents or of their cognitive talents. So then they are tested and then are put into other structures. So in mainstream education, there are some testings. I've heard that it is after age 10 in Austria and Germany. I'm not very familiar with it, but that's what I heard. I'm sure it's the case in the Netherlands and Belgium after the age of 12 years. After the age of 14 in Belgium, in Wallonia, in Italy, there is also a segregation on the basis of the cognitive talents. And after the age of 16, there actually, in the majority of countries in Europe, there is some kind of segregation. They don't go on with the same curriculum until they are 18 or 19 years old, or even 21, which would be also an interesting idea. In Waldorf, however, we have a tradition of no tracking until the age of 18, 19. So our tradition is they all have the subjects in all three realms. Yes, but in, let me see. Okay, I still have to say something before I go to the next slide. In 2005, I started an initiative group which wanted to find solutions for Flanders for this problem that after the age of 12, we had to send pupils away because that was the fact in our system. If they could not reach certain standards after class 6, they had to go to another school. And we lost pupils who really wanted to stay. And it was a pain for the pupils, for the parents, and for ourselves as teachers. And so we wanted to do something about it. And we started a new track, a second track. Now, this means that you go away from the one Waldorf curriculum. You have to adapt. You have to make it different. You have to drop some things that you really want them to have. And that was not easy to do. But still, we wanted to give these pupils at least as much as possible what they out of our Waldorf curriculum. Now, the whole system in Flanders makes it even worse after class 8, class 10, and class 12. So this one first step was not enough. And although many people in our school movement said, why do you do that? Why not keep them until class 8 at the very least? But we were we were forced by the authorities, by the inspection, who inspected us on the basis of our own standards. Yes, we had these own standards, but they were of equal worth as the others, so we had to adapt to it. In Germany, I think they have a system of Kleinklassen, as I heard. So we are not the only ones in the whole world doing this. I'm just telling you this out of my experience in my country, and you can certainly recognize things, I'm sure. Can you go on to the next slide? So here is our Flemish early tracking system. And I'm sorry to bother you with it, but it will explain some of the things I will say later. So you see that in class 7 and 8, there is an A track and a B track. And 15% of the kids have to follow the B track. And then class 9 and 10 have an academic track, a mixed track, and a vocational track. And the academic track is about almost half of all of the pupils, the mixed track 30%, and the vocational track 20%. And then in class 11 and 12, some of the pupils in class 9 and 10 drop out of the academic track and go to the mixed track or to the vocational track. Some of the mixed track drop out to the vocational track. So it's like an avalanche, and they just drop down. And often every 2 years they have to change their schools or their tracks, or there is a lot of misery and unhappiness because although our government thinks that 12 years old should just choose their profession after 18 and everything is solved, then they can follow the right track. Of course, it does not work like that. Pupils cannot choose at 12 years old or at 14, or what about 16? Then it maybe starts to come. Then there is also a class 13 for those who need a little bit more of mathematics and science. And then the aim of the academic track, according to our system, is an academic bachelor. The aim of the mixed track is a professional bachelor. And the aim of the vocational track is work, just working life. You can see that this goes totally against the ideas that we have in Waldorf. It's the B is only a solution for a small proportion of the children, and the whole system makes it super difficult for Waldorf education to thrive. There are even problems with the academic tracks, because the academic tracks are also split up in several tracks, like more maths, more science, more languages, more economics, whatever. A huge amount of different choices. And so some of our pupils, when they hear about how in other schools they can specialize in certain subjects, they leave our schools because of that. In a class 12, if 1/3 of the pupils were in our schools in class 1, it's a very successful class 12, because 2/3 have come at other points in time, after all of these outside, borderlines, so to say, or they have been sent away because they could not follow the academic track. And the value of the arts and the crafts as essential for the development of young people is hugely underestimated in our school system. For even if there are tracks with more art and more crafts or more technical subjects, there is no idea of that this also could be a developmental pathway, that you could have developmental tasks within crafts, within technical knowledge, within within art, they just don't know that. They just don't understand. Now, how does this work? Is it good for the pupils to be in such a system, in an early tracking system? And what's the difference between an early tracking system and a late tracking system? Now, there is not a lot of research on that, but in our country, when the Flemish government wanted to reform the secondary education, there was a lot of discussion about this and whether they should not change this. And at least some research was done, and with contradictory conclusions. Okay, but two researchers tried at least to make a comparison of an international comparison of systems and came out with the conclusions you can see in the following slide. So the results of early tracking before the age of 15 are the following. Negative for disadvantaged and cognitively weaker pupils. There is a stronger socioeconomic segregation. There is more aversion against lifelong learning, and there is no clear advantage for the cognitively stronger pupils that is better for them to have early tracking. So even the cognitively stronger pupils who are brought together in one class, and one could think that is easy, they have all the same kind of talent, so it's easier. I don't have to differentiate. You can think that as a teacher, but even they are not even there you cannot see that there is a difference with more heterogeneous classes where there is a mixture of talents. Some researchers say that they did not investigate it thoroughly enough. But yeah, you always have these controversies among researchers. I think this, in a way, shows at least that we could be rather okay with our idea of not having early tracking and try to give the pupils in our classes, except of course for special education, higher pedagogy, and so on. Normally, the majority of pupils could go on together in one class until the age of 15. Yeah, then the next slide, number 12. Here you can see a list of inspirations that I got for building a vocational upper school. So after we had this first class 7 and 8 in the B track, where that was established, we were wondering what happens when they come into class 9? Do they have to leave our schools? Can't we find a solution for them? Can't we find a solution that we would start a vocational upper school from class 9 onwards? I had the lucky strike that I was by then part of the European portfolio certificate project, and this meant the cooperation between 12 schools in 10 countries, and I could travel. I could travel a lot in the margin of that traveling for that project. I visited a lot of places and I read a lot of things. So I read Klaus Fintelman's book on the Hibernia Schule. Some of you may know it. It's fantastic because it is a different upper school where they integrated a vocational qualification into the traditional Waldorf curriculum, upper school. You have, and I met Klaus Pintelmann, and I was extremely impressed by him. I met him even before this project. I met Rudiger Iwan, and Rudiger Iwan worked a lot on portfolio work, and he had an initiative called Lernen durch Handeln, so learn by doing. And it was helping youngsters that had a difficult schooling to work within a project, make a portfolio out of it, and then also describing what they had learned during that project, and giving them a sort of, not really a certificate, but a portfolio showing their competences. I visited Ruskin Mill. I did not meet Angus Gordon back then, but later I did. And Ruskin Mill has also was also an initiative. This was in in England, in Stroud, and this initiative was built with the combination of the arts and crafts movement from Britain and Waldorf education, and they helped pupils or young persons who had gone into all sorts of problems and troubles, and tried to get them out of their troubles by pedagogy, by education, in crafts, in rearing fish, in woodwork, in all sorts of interesting activities, and they grow out of their pitfalls and grow into persons who believe in themselves and who can develop and grow into adults that are worthwhile for society. By now, this whole movement has become really huge in Britain, and it's extremely interesting. I was able to visit Schloss Hamborn, where they had a Berufskolleg, so the German type of vocational education. And then later I met other people who had the same kind of schools in other places in Berlin and so on. And then I also visited the upper school for bioecological building and biodynamic gardening in Fyresdalen in Norway. A fantastic initiative. And the Norwegians had curricula for 3 or 4 different vocations even. And well, it had to stop at some point because it was way out in the countryside, very small, and the youngsters wanted a town and not a very remote place where there was nothing happening. But the school itself was fantastic. So they loved their school, but not the surrounding where the school was placed. So they had to stop. And then there is also the Jena Gymnasium for farming, which has been there for ages and keeps on doing it. And then Michael Brater came into our lives, and he was a huge, huge influence. And so the next slides are actually dealing with, yes, thank you, with on the one hand, what Rudolf Steiner had said, and then later what Michael Brater added to that. So Rudolf Steiner did not talk a lot about differentiating the upper school, not yes, in class, yes, you should do what is necessary for each pupil in your class. That is written all over. But to segregate them or to put them into separate groups, and certainly not separate level groups, was not his idea. And this was built on his idea of having them all in a comprehensive school or in the Einheitsschule. Now, that's very important. I also believe in that. So we need comprehensive world knowledge and art for everyone. I am a big fan of that, of course. But then what about the systems that force you into something else? How to deal with that? Are we then no longer a Waldorf school if we have a vocational upper school? And there are some little elements in the lectures of Rudolf Steiner, like in the lecture 14 in GA 303, where he talks about differentiation according to the possible future of the pupils on the basis of their talents. Will they work with their head or will they work with their hands? He called it realistic or humanistic, and realistic was then linked to science, and humanistic was linked to history, languages, and so on. And art came on later. He started first talking a little bit about a difference between realistic and humanistic, and later art, but it was never developed. It was just an idea. Can you take the next slide? Now, actually, this idea of the that you can have that you can have a differentiated upper school after the age of 16 is taken up by the Oslo Byskolen in Norway. They took these words of Rudolf Steiner very seriously. And it is after 16 years old. Now, I think this is important. This is, of course, the Scandinavian system. They do it that way. From 16 years onwards, they try to give them different tracks. Now, in my country, I had to defend this because they do it earlier. So I used, for instance, work of Evelyn Krone, and she is a Dutch professor in neurocognitive developmental psychology. And she has done a lot of research, brain research actually, which shows that the pupils are not ready for choices, are not ready for long-term thinking. They cannot plan because they are just simply not ready for it yet. And she talks also about the 14 to 16 years dip in her most recent book. She does that. This is research by Evelyn Krone and Renske van der Kruijsen. And there she talks about the uncertainty about the self-image of the youngsters, how they are uncertain about their social skills, about their appearance, and especially about the school competences. And there is a lot of doubt in their head. And once they have in their head, I now say this from my own experience, once they think I am not good at maths, well, it can be totally linked to emotional things happening in class. Now, the good thing is that we in our Waldorf schools do not give up and do pull them into a lot of the more difficult to understand knowledge too, on the one hand, and that we also offer them other activities where they can, so that everyone can flourish. We do that, but they all experience parts of the curriculum where they are not so good. So they are more equal then. But on the other hand, in this 14 to 16 years dip, they can also start brooding. And this is something that also Steiner talks about. And he explicitly says that we have to draw them away from the brooding and bring them into interest for their tasks. And therefore, I think it's important to look at this. It does not come as a surprise to me that the Norwegian youngsters in that Oslo Byskolen, I talked to some of them, they were hugely enthusiastic about the choices that they could make. And on the one hand, they have the majority of all of their subjects together in one class. But each of these classes, there are, I think, 6 of them, but each of these classes consists of 5 different groups, and every group can go out into their own special interest for part of their week. So there is a realistic strand, they call it, with the natural sciences and mathematics. There is a humanistic one with languages, history, social studies. There is one for media. There is one for art and one for music. And they still have the majority of all the subjects together, but they have the chance to specialize a little bit. And it makes them very happy. I'm not surprised because when in our country, when because of course of our context, I got a lot of pupils asking me questions about their curriculum. So, and this started almost always in class 10. Then they started complaining, why can't I do more maths? Why can't I do more crafts? Why can't I do more art? And why can't I choose? And this is connected to what I see here as an evolution from the dip, then going to more certainty in life and looking around, looking and getting connections to the others and getting connections to the earth, to the world, and getting a feeling of what their future is, and then these questions pop up. What I then did was to divide my time in 2 blocks after some time. So one time, if I had a lesson, half of it was my time, half of it was their time. And in their time, I tried to differentiate. And this differentiation also was connected to portfolio work at some point. And but it was not enough. I mean, I could not do enough in only my one lesson. There is more to it. The system went against it, and we had to force them into things that they, maybe would never use later. But it's a fact. So therefore, I was really happy that my work in the Federation opened more possible routes for this question of how to differentiate not only within a class, but also between groups of pupils. So then the next slide. And I come back to this picture because you can see that in the blue there are smaller parts of the lemniscate and bigger. And you could imagine that if you go, thank you, Lisa. Can you go from the middle, and then go out in the smaller circle to one, and then the smaller one, and in the other side the bigger one. So a lemniscate, a big, yes, and then a big one. Yeah. So you could imagine that in some tracks you have a smaller part on the side of knowledge and cognitive competences, but a big side in the side on the side of the practice, or the other way around. And actually, if you look at this, you can see the several tracks that we have built in Belgium. We have one with a lot of activity and practice, and that is even on the borderline with special education, as well as a totally academic track with much less of the practical subjects. But in the middle of it all is still the artistic practice. So we try to keep that as much as possible, although there are also some difficulties with it nowadays, with the last modernizations, as they call it. But still, we try to preserve it. Now, if we go to slide 17. Yes, here we come to Brater's work. No, 16, sorry, 16. Here we come to Brater's work. So what did Brater teach us? We brought him to Belgium, and he did workshops with us when we started the vocational upper school in 2008. And our curriculum is built for a large part on his ideas. And we used his ideas to defend this curriculum in our own in our own system. And we managed to get it into the system. We managed to get it into the system that in a vocational education, you have a lot of art practice. And Brater explains that it has 4 stages. The first stage is you start with an open mind. You have an idea in your head, but you start with an open mind. You start, for instance, your painting, and you act with very careful observation. Oh, some things are changing here from what I first thought. I have to be really open because the paint and the paper and so on do not really react the way I thought it would. I have to go on. And then you come to stage 3 and you observe new hidden possibilities. What I'm painting here is actually really interesting. I did not think it would be like that, but I can see that it is also interesting. There is a new possibility here. And then at the end, you get some practical judgments that emerge out of the activity. And so you get new ideas. So what you do with art practice is you learn how to deal with the new and the unforeseen. And you learn to act with consciousness of the context. You sharpen your observation skills, and you free yourself from fixed templates, and you can open your mind for change and act in totally new situations. So you also learn social skills. That's what we often say, but I think we should stress also this being able to act in unforeseen, totally new situations, because that is what we need in our time. Okay, I have to go on because I see that I take more time than I thought. Next one. Then he has also 8 phases, and I will go quicker now, 8 phases in the work process. And it goes from discovering the task to executing. And in the next slide, you can read it later if you want to. You go from controlling and looking at what the mistakes are and trying to correct, to concluding the process and looking back and evaluate. Now, these 8 phases, we have built them into our curriculum, and it is really, really giving these youngsters a sense of competence that can be brought to a moment, to another field of work. So we had a sustainable building or bioecological building, and many of the pupils who ended our upper school entered totally different vocations even. They did other jobs, but in their jobs, they used the same kind of method, and it was a development for their another type of development than the cognitive one, but it had a deep impact, and they could master their work life much better. That's what I hear from the alumni. Okay, last slide, because I really took too much time. This is the full thing now, what we have in our country. So we start with the traditional curriculum of the Waldorf upper schools. Then we got the right for the specific alternative attainment targets for class 12 of Rudolf Steiner Education with the general academic secondary education. EQF is European Qualification Framework, EQF 4. And they were implemented and accepted by the parliament. So we had like the university entrance really strong. Then we started in 2006 the B classes. Then in 2008, the vocational secondary education track, sustainable bioecological building, EQF 4. We went until the 13th class and got an EQF 4. Then in 2016, we started a so-called, this is Belgian terminology, technical secondary education track, wood and building, EQF 4. And then after the reform of 2019, when I retired, we one by one, all of these qualifications came about with the help of my colleagues, my former colleagues. And so they entered one and after the other. Now, actually, we wanted to have three realms: building, care of people, and agriculture. The last one we did not manage. So next to the academic track, we have all of these less academic tracks, but still a lot of them also on the EQF level 4.
What would be interesting for me to know, are there in other countries, maybe outside of Europe, are there similar pathways of integrating the vocational track into the academic track? There's Joan in Cape Town.
Yeah, it's not so much that, is that we have had to go the route of introducing a 13th year, but still allowing our students to write the national senior certificate, so the national exam. But what I related to in terms of what Margareta was saying is that there's an enormous amount of pressure to introduce tracking earlier and earlier, because the state schools introduce it in class 10, and it doesn't give a lot of room for children to get a fully comprehensive education. And I really liked how you put into your slide that picture of they're not ready to make the choices at that early age, that 14 to 16, I can't remember what you called it. So that was the one thing. And the other is that we have, over the years, considered the possibility of some sort of vocational track for children who are very challenged in the academic realm, because it does give them an opportunity to work into the world without having to meet the requirements of academia. And one of the things we do have is like a remedial school, if you like, where they are kept with their age group. They have main lessons, and they're just taught at a level that they can manage. And many of those students will go on to, there's a local college that will give more of a vocational training. So they will continue up to about class 10 with that kind of, with a very practical orientated education, but with main lessons and main lessons that contain the themes of the main lessons for that age. It's a very difficult school to keep going financially, but I think that it's a possible path for dealing with this need for tracking, or this need for helping those children who don't cope with an academic stream, if you like.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, clearly there are a lot of frameworks in Europe, but also in other places, that describe the outcomes of learning in the widest sense. And they usually refer to as competencies or capabilities and expressions like that. And of course, if you look at, for example, the European qualification framework and you look at the European competence framework published by the European Commission, then clearly there are lots of what are often referred to as the soft skills, or the kind of skills that are on the website that you were just showing, these kind of inner processes and so on. The difficulty is that conventional forms of assessment find it quite hard to assess and quantify and measure them, which is why, even though most national curricula refer to them, they don't actually play a very strong role in qualification systems, except outside of school. School is probably the least developed area of qualification. There are many more areas of qualification that are much more sensitive to the fullness of what it is to be a human being and how important it is to be to have skills. School education is very narrow because it's political, and the politics are all about measurable outcomes. And we live in an age where what Gert Biester calls the global educational measurement industry basically dominates curricula everywhere. And it would require a lot of it, as Margareta has shown, it's possible if the local, national, or regional education system is willing and interested to have a more flexible system of qualifying skills and competences, then you can actually do quite a lot. And Waldorf, of course, falls into all those different categories in different ways. But it requires a kind of political lobbying act, which is what, in effect, European Council does on behalf of Waldorf Education. Margareta is the president, through its advocacy work, continuously working with other partners in the lifelong learning platform and other organizations, Learning for Wellbeing, who have similar interests. Not the same as Waldorf, but they have similar interests. And gradually, one can make a difference.
Can I add to that? Key is assessment. We had at one point we decided to have a project on assessment, but it is still one of our main topics we want to work on, because why in Flanders it is possible is to a large extent because the teachers can still assess. They can choose whichever assessment they want to, as long as they can explain it thoroughly, can show that they have done their work, and that they can convince the inspectors. I've seen over and over again that we could, as long as we knew what we were doing, we knew our criteria, we knew how to do it, and we could do it in very different ways. Or even to the point of what you taught me, actually, Martin, the naturally occurring evidence of Rosemary Hipkin. And that was really a massive insight because I could use it. So whenever you find these ideas and can really explain them thoroughly, and you can explain it to the authorities that have to decide whether you are doing a good job or not, especially inspectors, if they are also if they have also been teachers, especially then, and you can explain it thoroughly, and you can show that you're doing a good job, and that you don't need only the machines for assessment and the multiple choice questions for assessment. But of course, we have that freedom, and I know that it's not everywhere that you get that freedom.
I wish you a good day, a good evening, a good night, wherever you are, and looking forward to see you again next week. All the best for all of you.
Thank you, Margareta.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margareta. Thank you, Joost.